Do you see spirits? I don't, but you might. And you know who else saw spirits? Helene Hadsell. That's who saw spirits. And I wasn't gifted with that ability. I seem to be extremely grounded. All my personal planets are in Capricorn. Well, not all, most. My friends call me Earth Girl because I'm so grounded. But Helene could see into the fourth dimension. And if you read her books, you'll know she tells different stories about that. And I talked about this last year, but I've got new stories to share, which will then be posted on the blog later. So then you can read them more in depth. So if you read the Name It and Claim It game, you're going to know that in here, there's a part where she said she sees her guides and they said, "This isn't the book you're supposed to be writing." And she said, "I know." And she kept writing. And the reason she did that was, you have to remember, the first edition of this came out in 1971. Now there's whole YouTube channels devoted to people channeling, seeing in the fourth dimension, talking about energies, talking about all types of things that back then would be verboten. I mean, it's 54 years now since she wrote this book. And so she knew that what she did was she wanted to teach everybody about the spiritual lessons that are really popular now as more and more people awaken, as our consciousness as a humanity rises. But she knew back then that they couldn't, her messages wouldn't be heard. So what she did was she wrapped those stories with sweepstakes. She took so people would read this, and under the guise of winning giveaways, they would visualize, they would write affirmations. What are you doing? Oh, I'm praying for a prize. Oh, that was acceptable. Meanwhile, they're doing things like we do now and learning about their own ability as a human. And so she hid that. She hid all those teachings in here. And what's really interesting is, as I was working on the print edition, I don't know how many edits I went through, like dozens and dozens. And she was so brilliant. I didn't even hear or absorb some of the lessons that Helene taught until I was doing the Audible book. And as I was reading her words out loud, some of the depth of what she was teaching really hit me. So I highly recommend, not just for her books, for any book that you read, spiritual, mindset, self-improvement, manifesting, law of attraction, any type of book like that, even nonfiction business books, those types of things, anything that helps you improve in any way or to learn a new skill, read it out loud to yourself, and you will be amazed at what you absorb or what you pick up on that you didn't catch the first time you read it as like a regular book. Okay, I'm going to put that one aside now. 30 years later, 30, she published In Contact with Other Realms. And she waited 30 years because she knew nobody was ready to hear those stories. And last year I read you the story of how she started. She was 6. She saw her grandfather pass away, and she saw the souls coming to get him, his family to get him. And she saw those spirits. So she came in with this gift. I mean, even her mother said, her mother said, if I didn't give birth to you, I wouldn't think you were my child. I can only imagine, right? Oh, this is interesting. It actually took a person that borrowed the book from me to point out the spiritual aspect. Yeah, she did. She did a brilliant job in wrapping the spirituality with the sweepstakes stories. She was brilliant at that. So it was 30 years later, she finally told the stories. And in this one, she talks about thought forms and apparitions and levitating and becoming invisible. And I also last year read a spooky story that you can go read on the blog. It's about a church. And you can just put in the word church in the search bar and you can read it. I think I'm up to like 16 or 17 pages of blog posts. So there's lots of stories of Helene's that were lost, or she had never published them publicly before. And now you can read them. They're there for you to read for free. And then publishing back in her day is totally different than publishing in my day. So when this went out of print, because how it used to work is you'd get a publishing company or a printer to print you 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 copies. And then when they were sold, that was it. They were gone. It was done. You could maybe have, that's why books you'll see have first printing, second printing, third printing, because they would print 5,000. And when those sold, they'd print another 5,000. And when those sold, they sold another. So they would go through numerous printings. So back in her day, when that was done, that book was done. She didn't think that she could update it or revise it or buy another 5,000 books, or I don't know. Anyway, then she wrote this, but this wasn't in this format. She just had a few hundred printed up herself. And so this never had an ISBN. This was never available in bookstores or by the public. You couldn't buy it anywhere except if you mailed her a check and she would mail you a book. And that was the same with A Man Called Friday, her fiction book. So those technically, even though it's a second edition because I've updated it, but legally, like for ISBN wise, this would be a first edition because it was never printed and made available to the public. However, because she had printed it herself in 2008, no, this was 7. Sorry, The Man Called Friday was 8. I called it the second edition because that just made sense because I've added to it and updated it. And in here, so she took a few of the stories from In Contact with Other Realms and put them in here, but then she added a whole bunch. So there's a couple of stories in here where even her children are highly intuitive and can see in the fourth dimension. Dyke told me a couple of stories that aren't in her books. Like, for example, the night she had the accident that she nearly died, where her face basically smashed into the dashboard because they didn't have seatbelts or airbags or nothing. And it was a head-on collision. And she used the stop the bleeding technique. They moved into the house that they won. Several months later, she met Jose Silva. And one of the techniques he teaches is to stop the bleeding. And then that New Year's Eve, they were coming home and a bridge iced. And I don't know if they swerved or the other car swerved. I think the other car swerved and came straight into their lane. And they had a head-on collision. But Dyke at home, now this isn't in the story she has, Dyke at home got up and at 3:00 in the morning and just went and stood by the phone. And 2 minutes later it rang and his dad said, yeah, Mom, we've been in a terrible accident. Mom's in the hospital. And she nearly died, but she used the stop the bleeding technique she learned from Jose Silva. So what's really fascinating, so I have some new spirit stories that will be blogged about. So we have physical or spirit beings, feathers, which was somebody that sent her a letter, and who am I? So I think I'm going to start with who am I? Because a part of this is in one of the books, but not exactly this written, because she kept updating and editing things as she went along. So when I did the Name It, Claim It game, The first printing was 1971, but then the second edition came out in 88. And then when that was out of print, she was printing them at home, like surloxing them in 2003. But I had a digital copy to work from that was dated 2010. So she literally kept updating her books until she passed away. Now, she was terrible with technology. And also, you have to remember what the technology was like back then, too. Imagine Word 17 years ago. It's not as easy to work with as it is now. So she would want to add a story or some more information, and she would just plunk it wherever she could, figure it out. And so, for example, in 2009, she wrote the spec article, and she just tacked it onto the end of the book. Well, I moved it to where it should be with the Maneuvers for Wishcraft. So, I was able to fix those things. So this is a little bit about from one of the paragraphs about who she is, but this is a little different than the one that's in the book, but not by much. So she says, "Who am I? Am I a chosen one? I don't think so. Saving the world is not my assignment. Unlike Sylvia Browne, the dead and I do not converse. Jean Dixon made predictions. I do not. I am told I am simply a channel to help people to help themselves. This is my mission. I'm given assignments by spirits from other dimensions that appear to me. I can see them as clearly as if they are in the physical. We communicate telepathically. The same spirit does not appear for each person, which leads me to believe that they are the individual's personal guide or guardian angel. My assignments do not occur on a daily basis. In fact, they happen so sporadically, I still get startled when a being does appear, but I'm no longer frightened. When their visits first began, I would yell out loud, 'Go away! Leave me alone! I must be going crazy.' It was a number of years before I realized why they were coming. Yes, I got messages and explanations in dreams and in the meditative state, but I was reluctant to acknowledge their presence in the physical. It took a lot of patience and convincing on their part before I finally felt safe and confident enough to pursue an assignment. Today, when a fourth dimension spirit appears, I listen to the request and I wait for 3 signs, my way of confirmation. I am never foolhardy enough to pick up and move or blurt out something which may only confuse people. There are many ways of helping and healing people in the physical, emotional, and spiritual realms. I realize that a doctor practicing traditional medicine is necessary when one develops chemistry imbalances or their skills are required when repairing a body after an accident. Psychologists and counselors also serve a purpose by listening and offering suggestions when a person is going through mental trauma. Ministers, rabbi, and priests are available when one has doubts and questions about spiritual matters. I heal with words. The knowledge I convey does not come from books or from college instructions. I simply repeat what is given to me telepathically by a spirit and convey their message to the person it is meant for. If a person is surprised by the message I give them and they ask if I am psychic, my usual answer is, "This is one of my days when I am good at guessing." I find no need to describe the spirit that accompanies him or her when we meet. However, not all people have a spirit accompanying them. When this occurs, I engage in small talk like family, current events, etc. Today, at age 81, I am enjoying my freedom, space, and love being alone on my 5 acres in rural Alvarado, Texas. If I have the need for social contact, I let it be known that I am available. It is a technique I've used for the past 40 years. To my guardian, I request, let me be a channel to help people help themselves. And it doesn't take long before the phone rings or a letter arrives with a request from a person who is looking for a place to regroup and relax or to simply come to my center to talk over their challenges. Yes, I feel fortunate that I am aware of other dimensions. Our 3-dimensional world is our physical classroom for learning life's lessons. The fourth and other dimensions, the unseen worlds, are the site of our counselors and guardian angels, those spirits who offer us guidance and assistance. There are a number of people in today's society that are aware and operate interdimensionally. I feel blessed when we make contact with each other. In my book, In Contact with Other Realms, I share the assignments I was given by spirits from the other realm. I've been sent to Russia, Peru, and England, and I've been on the lecture circuit 40 years presenting self-awareness workshops. A chosen one? I don't think so. I know I agreed to the role I am now playing before I came into a physical body. I only began doing my job at age 40. For me, life is a daring adventure. Helene Hadsell. So that is really cool. I know that she can hear spirits because that's how I met her. She had, of course, the Name It and Claim It game. I love entering sweepstakes. And way back in 2008, before it was cool, I had a podcast. You can listen to my interview with her. I was a terrible interviewer, but it is what it is. And also, unlike now, we had to phone in on landlines. So the sound isn't balanced, or there was no options back then. We both phoned in on landlines, and I saw it on a screen and I hit record. That was it. And the company that ran it doesn't even exist anymore. Anyway, that's kind of funny. I'm so glad I did download the recordings though, so I had them. Anyway, off air, I asked her if I could come visit her, and she said no. And 3 days later, she phoned me back and said, "Your spirit guides are so loud, you better come." So that's why I really believe we had a soul contract, because my guides were so insistent I come see her. And that's why she said, "You need to teach maneuvers for witchcraft because no one else is going to teach it." Because I think at that point she knew that the baton wasn't going to be picked up by her family, and that I had the skill sets to do it. And it was probably, like I said, a soul contract. And my guides or her guide said, "This one." And like I said, and as I stated, Dyke was intuitive. He also had numerous people asking to purchase the rights to his mother's work. And when I told him what was said, he sold them to me. So there's something there. I believe I have a soul contract with the whole family, because I hang out with her granddaughter, Melissa, who is cool, who's my age. So we're like soul sisters. And, Dyke's like an uncle, and Fiona, his wife, Fiona. Oh, so we saw them this summer. I brought George down to Alvarado, and I brought him to Dallas, and we stayed in Burleson because there's an old hotel in Alvarado, and I stayed there twice, but I'm like, no, I need a newer hotel. And so we stayed in a brand new one in Burleson. It's only 10 minutes further away. It's no distance at all. So we got to stay with them. So I believe that I have, like a spirit connection with the whole family. We probably agreed to something before we got down here. Goodness gracious. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. I just think that's very funny. Now, she said she would get questions from people. This one's feathers, and I thought this one was interesting for tonight, because it's how she said she would talk to people's spirits. So the request came in. There's no name. It just says request and answer. This is what she typed up. And it was written in 2010. It says, "I would be very grateful if you could help me in understanding the implication of white feathers, or if you have any advice for me. For some time, I've been finding white feathers in my room. Initially, I did not give it much thought to it, as I assumed they might be coming in through the windows. One night, I decided to close my windows, and the next morning, there was another feather on my bed. I'm beginning to think there might be an implication. In the last 3 weeks, I have found 2 medium and 2 small feathers in my bedroom. I'd appreciate any information you can give me." And it's signed FM. Helene writes, "My first impression is that it may be a contact from another dimension. I suggest that you ask. You can either use one of the following techniques. 1, ask before going to sleep at night. Say, I want to have a dream. I want to remember my dream, and I want to understand my dream. 2, hold the feather in your hand, relax, and ask yourself, what do these feathers mean? Continue doing this meditation until you get an answer, and I suggest that you have a notebook to write down your impressions. One of my former students had an experience with feathers. She shared it in one of my classes. She had feathers appear in her closed car, on her tea table, and one time she went to the movie theater and noticed a feather on the chair before she sat down. Her feathers were 6 to 8 inches long. She assumed that they came from a turkey, a rooster, or a bird. Several months later, she got the significance of the feathers. She went to a flea market with her friend where vendors had booths displaying their merchandise. They stopped at a booth where an old man was displaying a collection of smooth rocks that he had painted with scenes of animals and Indian symbols. And when he saw her, he gave her a toothless grin and handed her an 8-inch feather. From your spirit guide, he gives you love and protection, he whispered. She told me that her friend did not get a feather. From that day forward, she keeps a feather in her car and one on a table by her front door. And she just had another thought, the song, "On the wings of a snow white dove, I send you my sweet love." So that's interesting. I like that. Now, I recognize right away when she says, ask before going to sleep at night, say, I want to have a dream. I want to remember my dream. I want to understand my dream. That is one of the Silva method techniques. So if you've taken the Silva method, you will recognize that right away. If not, you can go to the Silva method YouTube channel, and they have heaps of videos. Also, I'll put the links in the description for Ken Kasha and Stephen Dobos. Ken Kasha actually worked with Helene and knew her very well. He was trained as a Silva instructor at 19, and he's still teaching. How's that? I've taken several classes with him. He's phenomenal. And then Stephen Dobos does Silva Canada, and so I've actually helped him with multiple workshops, just like Helene used to do with Jose Silva. Isn't that fascinating? And then the last story I dug out for tonight was physical or spirit beings. And let me see, is there a year on this one? No. So I don't know when she wrote it. But it was after the movie A Beautiful Mind came out. I think that was 2003. That date pops into my head. Yes, there are many times I feel frustrated when I can't explain or convince someone that I or others are not crazy because we can see in other dimensions. An incident that comes to mind was after I watched the movie A Beautiful Mind. Russell Crowe played the life of John Nash, who won the Nobel Prize in Mathematics. Nash was declared a schizophrenic. One evening, I received a phone call from a woman who attended my workshop on self-awareness. Her brother Matthew, a missionary, and her sister-in-law were visiting. Neva were visiting. She wanted me to meet them. Shortly after they arrived, I noticed an elderly spirit being standing behind Neva. The spirit looked to be in her late 60s. Her white hair pulled back in a bun and her granny glasses halfway down her nose. She looked concerned, and I sensed she was trying to tell me something. It was in regard to Neva. I learned a long time ago not to blurt out to strangers when I see a spirit being accompanying someone. I can only guess how she figured that out. I tried to figure out why they are present. Most of the time, it doesn't serve a purpose. I ignore them. This time was different. The spirit wanted me to tell Neva something. I felt it was of a personal nature, and I found a way to make it possible. Neva, I have something in my office I would like to show you. The woman that brought the couple stood up and said, "Ooh, I want to see it too." Later, I responded. Neva followed me into my office. After we were seated, I turned to Neva and asked, "Who is the elderly woman with gray hair and glasses that came with you? She wants to tell me something." Neva's eyes widened and she sighed with relief. "Do you see her too? She's my Aunt Eva. She's been around me since she died. It's been over 30 years. I was 11 at the time." Aunt Eva was a school teacher. She lived with my mother and father on our farm. I had no sisters and brothers, so she was like a big sister to me. Oops. It's the end of the day, and I've been talking a lot. I led a very sheltered life. Ooh, hold on. I'll edit that out after. I led a very sheltered life until I met my husband, Matthew. His mother and fathers are missionaries. After we were married, we joined and worked with his parents in a village on the outskirts of Valise. Matthew's mother was a take charge kind of person. She was not pleased when the women of the village came to me for advice. Aunt Eva was always around in spirit, and I talked to her as if she were in the physical. One day, as I was relaxing by the water and talking out loud to Aunt Eva, Matthew's mother overheard me, and she seemed interested and wanted to know more about her. I explained how I relied on her and how she was able to foresee events before they happened. That evening, Matthew confronted me and said the devil was using me in the guise of my aunt. Matthew, his father and mother, and 2 other missionaries convinced me that I was possessed. They decided I needed to be placed in an institution for evaluation. I agreed. Words were not able to describe the torture of electric short treatments I was subjected to. I was at their mercy and drugged when objected. Tell them that you no longer see me, so they stop this barbaric treatment, my aunt whispered to me in one of my lucid moments. When I told the doctor she was gone, they released me. That was 2 weeks ago. Matthew decided we needed to come to Dallas and visit his sister. I'm glad you're here because I need to explain something to you. First of all, you're not crazy. Second, I don't believe your aunt is in a thought form. We all have guides, counselors, and guardian angels. Some people like you and I are able to see them. Unfortunately, your in-laws have mindsets about people who are able to see into other dimensions. I think they are afraid. My suggestion is to not tell anyone about your ability to see in other dimensions. Be assured it is a gift, and one day it will be accepted by the masses. We're already there, right? Or getting there. People will envy you for your ability. I'm sorry you had to be subjected to shock treatments. One day that form of treatment will be obsolete. In the meantime, we need to keep our talent of seeing other dimensions a secret. Isn't that interesting? And of course, it's not a secret anymore because I get on social media and tell everybody and then put it on a blog and let the world read it. Because we are at a different time and consciousness is raising. And I wanted to show you that I brought in the picture of her her messenger. Now, if you've read this story, this was the messenger that came to her when she was 17 and said, no, this was the one that she had. I think, she has so many spirit guides, that woman. This was the one that she had when she was supposed to be writing the book. And actually, no, the story's in here. It's called The Messenger. That would be a clue, right? And she was sick. And then he came and saw her. And then when she was older, right, she came and she painted him. There's story of, it's on page 28. And she says, the panel still hangs in my center where I teach self-awareness classes, and it can be seen on the cover of this book. But when I printed the 3rd edition, I didn't have the picture. And actually, I have the piece of wood. The original frame, if you watch some of her videos on YouTube, you can see it hanging in the background. But she had glued it to some particle board with a quarter round as the frame, and it was warped and damaged. So I ripped the painting off, and then it started to warp now. So we have it squished between some boards to keep it flat. And one day I'm going to have an opportunity to get it framed, maybe even with metal to really hold the wood. And then I'll have a spot in a house to hang it. But I don't have any space here either right now. So maybe one day, putting it out there. Maybe I'll ask her messenger if he'd like to be hanging on my wall. That's funny. Why not, right? Would you like to hang in my house? Hang out with me? That's funny. And also, she talks about her self-awareness. I found part of one lecture series a couple of years ago, and this year Dyke gave me some new ones. So there's 2 new self-awareness tapes on YouTube and on my blog. So what happens is when you upload audios to platforms like YouTube, it does degrade the quality of the audio a little bit. Sometimes people say they can't hear her very well. And so I also put the straight up audio on my website. So you can listen either here or on my website if you want to listen. And you can listen to those stories of self-awareness. And it's her talking. Now, of course, one tape was very damaged. I didn't even know it was her. And then after it was digitized, it snapped. And this one was in better condition and there was more of it, but I think it's still missing some, or they didn't record it very well. So yes, Vaughn says Helene wanted to share the knowledge. 100% she wanted to share the knowledge. And I just wanted to see if there's any questions from Instagram. And no, I think that's it. And you just have to go to my blog and check out all the stories that I put up, and these will be added. And this week is her kind of memorial. She passed away October 30th. And so I will be sharing some information about that. And there's a blog post I did last year. You can go read it now about her and her epitaph. She actually wrote her own epitaph and had it put up at the house. Unfortunately, over time, you can't see it anymore. So it's there, but it's partially covered and faded. And but she's still remembered, and she's here in our hearts. So that's what counts. And that's what we have. But yeah, happy heavenly birthday. She would have been this year 100. This year she was 101 because she was born June 1st. So I'm still working on getting an astrologer to talk about her life story, because she was quite a pistol. And I've been finding, if you go and look at the photo album and the articles that I found this summer, I've added a lot of photos to the photo album. I'm still working on getting more because some of them were hard to photograph or get. So I'm having somebody work on them. And like I said, we now have those tapes. So every time, just keep following, because I keep getting more and more information about her or finding more and more things to share. It's like a treasure hunt. I love it. And so, yeah, so she could really see into the 4th dimension. The stories I shared tonight, I called it a spirit chat, and I have like a little Halloween thing because let's face it, it's Halloween this week. But they're not really spooky to me. The one I shared last year, she was a kid when she told that story, and it was a bit of a haunted story, which made it kind of fun. And that's the church story. You can go read that on the blog. I'll put a link to last year's chat and to the articles from last year in the description, and they'll be easier to find. But she was fun. You know, she could see spirits, and when you're little, you don't understand, right? Like you don't start to understand this stuff until you're older. And like she said, she didn't really start to accept her assignments or her place in this world teaching until she was halfway through the ride, till she was 40. You know, and I think it's also because then her children were older. And you know, it was like that. Anyway, so that's the spirit chat for tonight. And I hope you enjoyed Helene's stories. And I'm sorry that I can't share any of my own because I don't see into the fourth dimension. I have skills Helene didn't. She was not very good on the computer. I'm not, you know, I can't program anything, but I edited her books properly. I can do YouTube. I do TikToks. I can roughly edit things. I can do lots of techie things that she could not. I have a bit of a business acumen she did not. Like, I know now her books aren't going to be out of print. For example, I've done stuff that she wanted to do, but either didn't have the skill set or the technology wasn't there, or a combination of things. She wanted to make audiobooks. All her books are now in audio. She wanted to get her books translated. They're all in Spanish. I'm working on French, German, and Italian. She wanted to see her books in bookstores. So I've just transferred the print availability from Amazon to Ingram Spark. So companies like Barnes and Noble can order her book. They couldn't order it before. And so I'm working on that. So it's kind of exciting to get all these, you know, ducks in a row that she wasn't able to, but you can still buy it on Amazon. Like if you wanted to go and order a book. So you've got Kindle and Kobo and Google Books and Apple Books and Audible and Amazon and and then of course I always, being the contest queen, because I don't just maintain Helene's legacy, and I write books too, and I teach people how to win. I say I teach people how to win in life, both sweepstakes and in life. As Helene was a contester, I'm a contester, which is another connection I think she thought we had, because then I understood why the naming claiming game was so significant and how to win the prizes, because I do the same thing. Stacy says, I see spirit. Oh, stay in peace, not Stacy. That is cool. Yeah. So like I said, I don't have some of her skills, but like I said, I have other skills. So, but that's the whole point, right? If everybody was exactly the same and had the same skills, that would make this world so boring. We need everybody, right? They say sell your strengths and hire your weaknesses, right? I'm good at doing this, but you know, there's a reason I have a bookkeeper and an accountant, because I can organize the files, but I'm terrible at bookkeeping and accounting. So I pay them to do it, and he's happy because he gets to do what he does best. And right, we need, like, I had a graphics person do these. I can't do that. And then I took the files down to the print shop and they had banners made. I can't do that either. Like, right? We need everybody. We need everybody to do all the different things. And that's what makes this world so exciting, is that we all get to have adventures and assignments, and we're all part of the grand mosaic of life. And mine just doesn't see into the fourth dimension. But that's okay. Because if I want a reading or something, I can hire somebody that can. And I know Helene's around me, because when I first acquired the rights to her books and I was just starting to edit, I was working on my own book, which I'm finally finishing. My girlfriend, who can see into the fourth dimension, said, she was funny, wasn't she? I said, yeah, how do you know? She goes, I just heard mine first. And I went, okay, so her books are done first. Now I'm going to finish mine. So there you go. Anyway, go to the blog and check out all her other spooky articles and things that she wrote that were, mostly, she's definitely around you, mostly in the kitchen. Of course she's in the kitchen. That's the best spot in the house. Everybody hangs out in the kitchen. Isn't that why you end up having a party and it's a kitchen party and everyone ends up in the kitchen? But yeah, she's a good soul, and she's out there, and she wants everyone to do well and win in life, and so do I. So until